Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take source material, could be articles, notes, research, and really plunge in to find the key insights, helping you get well informed fast.
Hmm.
Today, we're tackling a really interesting set of headlines, all from India and all dated May 29, 2025. So, our mission is to unpack the details provided in these sources, headline by headline, and see what they tell us about what's happening in India and its place in the world just on this one particular day, almost like a news rundown, but deeper.
Absolutely. And looking at a single day's headlines like this, it gives you such a unique snapshot, doesn't it? You get this incredibly diverse range of issues all at once.
Yeah, you really do.
From public health, security challenges, international relations, even consumer rights and tech shifts.
hmm
The idea isn't just to read them, but to really elaborate on the specifics the sources give us.
Okay, so let's dig into this stack. Where do our sources suggest we start today? Maybe with that significant public health update.
Yes, that seems like a good place. The sources report a key development concerning COVID-19, the first death reported in North India, specifically in Chandigarh, based on this data.
Right, and the details are quite specific. A 40-year-old man from Firozabad in Uttar Pradesh, he passed away at GMCH Chandigarh on May 29th itself.
Correct. And we learned from the material that he'd actually been transferred from a hospital in Ludhiana. He was admitted with severe respiratory distress, tested positive for COVID.
And he'd been ill for a while before that.
Apparently so. The reports mentioned symptoms like fever, cough, breathlessness for several days before his first hospitalization on May 22nd. He got transferred to Chandigarh on the 26th and then sadly succumbed just 3 days later. The sources also note a prior history hospitalization for hepatitis B.
So, what's the official response looking like, according to these reports? How are health authorities reacting?
Well, they're investigating to figure out the specific variant involved. Dr. Suman Singh, Chandigarh's Director of Health Services, she's issued public health advice based on this. You know, the usual precautions: avoid crowded places, hygiene, maybe masks in some settings.
Okay.
And the material clarifies there's no plan for routine mass screening, but they will test suspected cases, people showing up with flu-like symptoms or pneumonia.
And I saw mention of genomic surveillance, a specific request.
Yes, exactly. Public health experts, based on the sources, have asked for samples from Punjab to be sent for genomic surveillance. That's crucial for tracking which strains are circulating.
Makes sense.
The administration is reportedly on high alert, really emphasizing vigilance and, COVID-appropriate behavior to try and prevent more spread.
The sources also put this into a national context, right?
Yep.
Regarding total COVID deaths.
They do. The material mentions a total of 8 COVID deaths reported across India nationally within these sources. In this specific Chandigarh case, the man's body was handled per protocol given to the family. And so far, the family members are reportedly asymptomatic. The focus seems to be on tracking and safety measures based on the data coming in.
Okay, let's shift gears quite dramatically now. There's an international story here involving New Zealand that seems to have caused quite a reaction.
Yes, this one generated significant criticism. New Zealand's immigration minister, Erica Stanford, faced backlash from Indian politicians and media after some remarks she made in Parliament.
And the core issue, according to the sources, was her comment about getting a lot of immigration-related emails from Indian citizens. And she likened them to spam. Is that right?
That's essentially it. That's what really sparked the outcry. Reports from India detail one MP calling it deeply offensive and disrespectful. Media outlets accused her of stereotyping.
How did Minister Stanford respond? Did she walk it back?
Well, according to the sources, she defended her comments, said they were taken out of context. Her clarification was that she only meant she doesn't respond to those specific kinds of emails like unsolicited requests for visas or jobs.
But not everyone bought that explanation.
No. Labour MP Priyanka Radhakrishnan pushed back hard, calling the remarks prejudiced, bad for social cohesion. She actually called for an apology,
Which Stanford declined.
which Stanford declined to give, yes.
Okay. And what about the Prime Minister? Did he weigh in?
Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, based on the material, did acknowledge that maybe Minister Stanford could have expressed herself a bit better, but he also stressed she didn't intend to offend and was just using, the most recent example that came to her mind.
And this is all happening just as New Zealand is trying to strengthen ties with India, particularly trade ties.
Exactly. The timing is really sensitive. New Zealand sees India as a priority partner, a fast-growing economy. In fact, Foreign Minister Winston Peters is actually scheduled to be in New Delhi soon for talks specifically on advancing free trade negotiations.
So, the obvious question arises, which the sources mention. Could these remarks actually damage those diplomatic and trade efforts?
That's definitely the concern flagged in the reports. Minister Stanford reportedly felt the reaction was sort of beyond her control. But the New Zealand government's official line, as presented, remains focused on locking in those economic ties. Despite the backlash reported in India, NZ officials quoted are still stressing their commitment to a strong relationship.
Okay, let's pivot back to domestic issues in India, specifically consumer protection. The government seems to be taking action against e-commerce platforms.
Indeed, the sources say the Indian government has issued over 400 notices. They're targeting e-commerce platforms and retailers over these things called dark patterns.
Right, these deceptive designs online.
Exactly. Practices designed to manipulate customers. The sources give examples like hidden charges that pop up late, misleading discount information, or maybe items getting sneakily added to your cart without you clearly agreeing.
And the Consumer Affairs Minister, Prahad Joshi, is quoted.
Yes, emphasizing the need for trust and transparency in the digital marketplace. It seems like a real push.
Have the platforms responded?
Well, the reports indicate that over 50 platforms have agreed, at least in principle, to comply with the government's guidelines on this. Minister Joshi apparently chaired a meeting with stakeholders, highlighted a rise in consumer complaints about these tactics, and urged companies to basically self-audit and get rid of them.
The sources also mentioned this isn't just an issue in India, right? There's international context.
They do. They mentioned the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, has its own definition. Similar stuff like tricking you, making it hard to cancel things, pushing unwanted purchases.
And there was pushback earlier from tech companies.
Yes, the material notes that back in 2023, some major U.S. tech firms apparently opposed India's proposed regulations on dark patterns. Their argument was, it could hinder the digital economy, maybe create overlapping rules.
Was there an industry call for self-regulation instead?
There was. The Asia Internet Coalition reportedly urged India to lean toward self-regulation rather than direct government intervention, arguing that existing laws were already sufficient.
So putting it all together, what does this crackdown tell us about India's approach here?
It seems pretty clear, despite that industry pushback noted in the sources, that India is quite committed to bolstering consumer protection online. Minister Joshi's quotes reiterate that dedication to empowering consumers. They seem to be pushing hard for transparency, trying to balance regulation with, allowing businesses to grow.
Okay, let's turn now to some high-stakes international diplomacy. There's talk of a potential meeting between Indian PM Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Yes, the sources mention this possibility. The potential venue is Rio de Janeiro, during the 17th BRICS Summit, which is scheduled for July 6th and 7th.
And this possibility doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's immediately framed against the backdrop of recent tensions, particularly around China's military support for Pakistan.
That's the crucial context the material provides. The sources detail that China reportedly fast-tracked the supply of J-35A stealth fighters to Pakistan after India's Operation Sindoor, which the sources describe as targeting terrorist camps in Pakistan and occupied areas.
And there was the issue around the J&K attack investigation, too.
Right. Beijing apparently backed Islamabad's call for an international probe into that April 22nd attack in Jammu and Kashmir, where 26 people, mostly tourists, were tragically killed. India, according to the sources, rejected this, seeing it as a stalling tactic.
The sources even get into specific military hardware used during recent clashes.
They do. During that May 7th-10th cross-border conflict described in the material, Pakistan reportedly fired Chinese-made PL-15 missiles. And there's an allegation mentioned that this was potentially with Chinese satellite support for targeting, although India's air defenses reportedly intercepted them.
But here's what's interesting. Despite all these quite serious points of friction, the sources say New Delhi's public stance is still committed to normalizing relations with China.
It is. India's position, as stated in the material, emphasizes that things like mutual trust, respect, and sensitivity are essential for that relationship. Meanwhile, though, the sources report China continues to strengthen its security and economic ties with Pakistan, including plans to upgrade the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the CPEC project.
And this potential meeting in Rio would build on previous efforts.
Correct. It would be their second meeting since the last BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia. That's where they reportedly started trying to mend ties after the years of strain following the military standoff in eastern Ladakh. So even with ongoing tensions, the diplomatic possibility remains.
Okay, shifting focus back inside India, but sticking with security this time related to technology regulation. News about strict rules for CCTV manufacturers.
That's right. Pretty significant regulations came into effect on April 9th. Basically, manufacturers now have to submit their CCTV hardware, software, and source code for government assessment before they can sell it in India.
And the stated aim is pretty clear, according to the sources: cybersecurity.
Exactly. Enhancing cybersecurity and preventing potential espionage risks. The sources specifically mentioned concerns about risks associated with Chinese surveillance technology.
This must be causing some waves in the industry.
It definitely is, based on the reports. The sources mentioned industry concerns about potential supply chain disruptions, the speed of government approvals or lack thereof, and, the sensitivity around handing over source code for scrutiny.
Which companies are affected?
Major global players are mentioned. Chinese firms like Hikvision, Dahua, Xiaomi, but also South Korea's Hanwha, and even the US-based Motorola Solutions. Some companies, the material says, have warned this could halt projects, maybe lead to financial losses.
What's the justification from India's side, the counter-argument?
India's cybersecurity experts, cited in the sources, argue that these internet-connected cameras are just inherently risky from an espionage perspective. They could potentially be controlled remotely from hostile locations. The government seems firm on this. Reports say they've rejected industry requests for delays, emphasizing these are genuine security concerns. National security is the priority.
And China, being a major source of this tech, has reacted.
Yes, China reportedly criticized the regulations, calling them discriminatory. The sources also put this in the context of India's previous actions, like banning certain Chinese apps and tightening foreign investment rules after those border clashes a few years back.
So what's the situation on the ground right now? Are things moving?
The material suggests things are slow. There are delays in approvals, hundreds of applications apparently pending. Companies are reportedly struggling with the requirements, things like factory inspections, source code testing. Retailers are seeing sales decline. It's impacting this booming surveillance market, which was projected to hit, $7 billion by 2030.
Is there any potential fix being discussed?
The government is reportedly considering accrediting more testing labs to maybe speed things up. But the underlying message seems to be that the firm's stance on national security isn't changing.
Okay, let's turn to a very different kind of story now. A truly somber one, with international dimensions, a human smuggling tragedy.
Yes, this concerns Harshkumar Ramanlal Patel. He's an Indian national from Degucha, Gujarat, and he's just been sentenced to 10 years in prison in a U.S. court.
And the reason, according to the sources, is his role in a human smuggling operation that had devastating consequences.
Absolutely devastating. It led to the deaths of 4 Indian migrants back in 2022.
The details are heartbreaking. The victims were a family.
Yes, Jagdish Patel, who is 39, his wife Vashalaben, their 11-year-old daughter Vihangi, and their 3-year-old son Dharmik. They all froze to death attempting to cross the U.S.-Canada border in extreme winter conditions, January 19th, 2022.
And their bodies were found on the Canadian side.
That's right, found by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police near Manitoba, just north of the U.S. border. The family had apparently traveled to Canada on tourist visas. Their hope was to enter the U.S., likely seeking better opportunities, but illegally.
And this Harshkumar Patel, the one sentenced, he had an alias.
Yes, the sources mention he used the alias Dirty Harry. He was apparently part of a network that facilitated these illegal crossings, specifically for Indian nationals.
What happened at the sentencing?
The reports note he remained silent, showed no visible emotion. His lawyer argued he played only a minor role, but the prosecutors pushed back hard, saying he knowingly exploited vulnerable people's hopes for his own financial gain.
Were there others involved in that crossing attempt?
Yes. The sources state 7 others from the same group actually survived, though some suffered severe frostbite. It highlights just how perilous that journey was.
This case must have resonated strongly back in India, especially Gujarat.
Very much so. The sources note that many families in Gujarat unfortunately look for these illegal routes abroad. The U.S. judge in the case called the deaths avoidable, really emphasizing the dangers involved in these smuggling operations.
And Patel's future?
He's likely to be deported back to India after serving his sentence. The whole incident serves as a grim reminder, highlighted in the sources, of the profound risks people take and the ruthlessness of the smuggling networks. Authorities keep warning against it.
Okay, let's circle back to U.S. foreign policy and trade. Former President Trump's policies are apparently being discussed in a U.S. court right now.
Yes, and in a really interesting way. Officials from the Trump administration are actually arguing in court that his intervention, specifically offering trade access to both India and Pakistan, helped prevent what they claim could have become a full-scale war between the two.
Which is a claim India has repeatedly denied, as the sources clearly state.
Exactly. That's a key point in the material. India's consistent denial of any such mediation role by Trump. Trump himself had previously claimed he threatened to halt trade with both countries to force a ceasefire after India's Operation Sindoor.
But India's position is different.
India maintains, according to the sources, that the pause in firing back on May 10th was negotiated directly between the Indian and Pakistani armies. No external mediation involved.
So why is this argument coming up in court now? What's the context?
The U.S. Court of International Trade is reviewing lawsuits challenging some of Trump's tariffs, specifically the Liberation Day tariffs. His former administration officials are using this case to argue for the strategic importance of presidential power to use tariffs as leverage.
They're linking tariff power to national security.
Precisely. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is quoted warning that restricting the president's tariff powers could jeopardize regional security, undermine trade deals, and potentially allow actions by countries like China to go unchecked.
And Secretary of State Marco Rubio made a similar point.
Yes. Rubio and others reportedly argued that limiting the president's power to impose tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, could actually invite foreign retaliation and harm U.S. interests. Rubio argued Trump's threats actually deterred retaliation in the past.
This is all happening while India and the U.S. are currently negotiating a trade agreement.
It is, and Trump himself is quoted claiming India offered zero tariffs on U.S. goods during discussions, adding another layer. The court's decision is expected soon, and as the sources note, it could have real implications for U.S. foreign policy, national security approaches, and global trade by setting precedents on presidential tariff authority.
Let's shift focus now to Jammu and Kashmir and political developments there. Former Chief Minister Omar Abdullah is renewing calls for statehood.
He is. Abdullah reportedly stressed that the political conversation around reversing J&K's Union territory status is still very much alive. He even cited a recent document from Niti Aayog, reportedly shared with the Prime Minister's office, that explicitly mentioned restoring statehood.
But he disagreed with one particular tactic being floated.
That's right. He apparently opposed the idea of convening a special assembly session just to push the statehood demand. He stated he didn't agree with that specific approach. This is all in the context, of course, of the August 5, 2019 revocation of Article 370, which restructured J&K into two union territories, a move regional parties like his have consistently opposed.
What else did Abdullah talk about, according to the sources?
He also touched on the impact of that terrible April 22nd terrorist attack in Pahalgam. He noted it basically halted tourism in Kashmir. He urged locals to start visiting tourist spots again themselves first, before expecting outsiders back.
And he mentioned social media campaigns.
Yes, he called for an investigation into social media campaigns that were apparently urging people to boycott Kashmir, arguing these calls were completely unjustified.
He also spoke about the need for coordination on security, didn't he?
He did. He emphasized how critical coordination is between an elected government in J&K, the Lieutenant Governor's office, and the union government in Delhi to ensure security and prevent attacks like the one in Pahalgam.
Acknowledging the division of responsibilities.
Exactly. He noted that while his administration, if in power, could promote tourism and build infrastructure, the actual security apparatus falls under the LG's jurisdiction. He also reiterated his call for the union government to use its intelligence agencies to trace the source of those boycott calls, emphasizing that Kashmiris condemned the attack and shouldn't be unfairly blamed.
Okay, moving from politics to military updates. The Border Security Force, the BSF, is getting new uniforms.
Yes, a significant upgrade. The sources report the BSF is introducing a new digital camouflage pattern uniform. It's described as a major step up in their combat wear, expected to be rolled out within about a year.
What are the key features highlighted in the material?
Enhanced durability and comfort seem to be priorities. They're using a more breathable fabric blend. It's 80% cotton, 19% polyester, and 1% spandex. That's different from the current 50-50 blend. It also has sealed fiber patterns, meant to make it more resistant to fading.
And the pattern itself, the camouflage.
It's quite specific. The color scheme is detailed, 50% khaki, 45% green, and 5% brown. The idea is better concealment across the varied terrains where the BSF operates. And interestingly, the digital print itself is copyrighted to stop unauthorized copies.
This follows similar moves by other branches, right?
It does. The Indian Army and the Air Force introduced their own digital camo uniforms back in 2022. So this aligns with that broader trend. The BSF is a huge force, about 270,000 personnel, with really crucial roles, from border guarding to anti-terror and anti-Maoist operations. This uniform upgrade has apparently been in the works for over a year and a half.
The goal seems practical: better performance in tough conditions.
Yeah. Exactly. Better mobility, better durability for challenging terrains and combat situations. It's framed as reinforcing the BSF's commitment to being secure and effective in the field.
All right, let's look at a concerning trend from the corporate world in India, now a reported surge in employment fraud.
Yes. The sources, particularly citing a report from the consulting firm EY, point to a significant increase in different kinds of employment fraud hitting Indian companies.
What types of fraud are we talking about here?
The material lists things like fake credentials, people moonlighting, holding multiple jobs secretly, and even using deepfake technology during job interviews.
Wow, deep fakes.
Yeah. And as a result, companies are relying much more heavily on background checks. The EY report apparently found widespread discrepancies during these checks across many sectors: IT, finance, healthcare, you name it.
And who's involved? Is it just entry-level folks trying to get a foot in the door?
Actually, no. What's striking, according to the sources, is that experienced professionals are frequently involved. The stats from the report are pretty eye-opening.
Give us some examples.
Okay, so in healthcare, 75% of flagged candidates apparently submitted fake employment documents. In financial services, 84% overstated their experience, and half the education discrepancies involved fake certificates. IT saw 45% of flagged candidates moonlighting. BPO-KPO sector, 38% failed to provide mandatory documents. Professional services, 88% had forged education docs. And back in healthcare, 84% got certifications from non-accredited places.
That's staggering, and it's mostly experienced people.
That's what the sources emphasize. 96% in healthcare, 88% in financial services, 79% in IT were experienced professionals. The report suggests it's become relatively cheap and easy to get hold of these falsified documents, making the fraud quite rampant.
So what are companies doing to fight back?
Background checks are now seen as basically non-negotiable for many. HR departments are increasingly using technology-based solutions for verification. Experts quoted stress the benefits like validating healthcare licenses reduces clinical errors, or integrity checks protect confidential data.
So it's becoming standard operating procedure.
That's the picture painted by the sources. Structured, third-party background checks are becoming the norm in sectors like IT, healthcare, and finance. The goal is ethical hiring, informed decisions. This push for tech-driven verification is seen as vital to protect businesses and maintain trust.
Okay, let's loop back to military actions for a moment. We mentioned Operation Sindoor earlier regarding India-China-Pakistan dynamics. The sources actually provide more detail on the operation itself.
They do. The material specifies that Operation Sindoor targeted 76 Pakistani border outposts and 42 forward defense locations, or FDLs. This is reportedly retaliation for unprovoked firing and shelling by Pakistani Rangers along the international border in Jammu.
And the BSF played a specific role beyond just responding.
Yes, the BSF was involved and reportedly destroyed 3 terrorist launch pads being used for infiltration attempts. One near Sundarbani was allegedly operated by Pakistan's ISI intelligence agency.
What triggered the operation, according to the reports? What was the initial action from Pakistan?
The sources state Pakistan started it with heavy firing on about 60 Indian posts and 49 forward positions. This was allegedly cover fire for around 40 to 50 terrorists trying to infiltrate into India. The BSF then responded with those precision strikes.
India's own defense systems were involved?
Yes, indigenous systems are highlighted. The Akash missile defense system, for example, was reportedly crucial in countering Pakistan's long-range missile attacks during that period.
Which connects to that broader Make in India initiative we discussed.
Exactly. Experts cited in the sources emphasize that Make in India has significantly helped reduce defense costs through domestic production.
Are there specific cost comparisons mentioned?
Yes. The sources give examples. Pinaka rockets at around $56,000 each, and the Akashir missile defense systems are presented as more affordable compared to U.S. options like the GMLRS missile, $148,000, or the NASAM system.
Implying an impact on international suppliers.
The material suggests so. The success of India's growing domestic defense industry has reportedly affected American defense companies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing, as India leans more on its own production capabilities.
So the takeaway is India's commitment to this path.
Yes, despite the tensions, India's focus, as presented in the sources, is on strengthening its own defense capabilities via Make in India, while also aiming for regional stability. And the BSF, of course, continues monitoring the border closely.
Okay, let's switch back to immigration, specifically Indian students aiming for the U.S. There's news about visa appointments being paused.
That's right. The U.S. Embassy and consulates in India have reportedly put a pause on scheduling new student visa appointments. The reason given is they need further guidance from the U.S. State Department on processing procedures.
And the source links this pause to a specific directive about screening.
It does. It connects the pause to a directive reportedly from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, which emphasizes implementing social media screening for visa applicants.
What's the immediate impact for students?
Well, while people can still submit applications, this new vetting process, including looking at social media, is expected to significantly slow down approvals. This hits Indian students particularly hard, as they're the largest group of foreign students in the U.S. There's now considerable uncertainty for students hoping to start in the September 2025 term.
And no clear timeline for when appointments might resume.
The sources indicate no specific timeline has been given, which leaves students and universities kind of in limbo. Experts quoted warn these delays could really disrupt academic plans, maybe force deferrals or make students look elsewhere.
This seems to fit into a broader pattern in U.S. immigration policy.
It does seem aligned with wider U.S. policies focusing more on national security and, increasingly, applicants' digital footprints. Critics mentioned in the sources worry that social media screening could lead to unfair rejections based on, old posts or misunderstood content.
How are Indian officials and universities responding?
Indian officials are reportedly watching closely, urging the U.S. to speed things up, but also ensure fair assessments. U.S. universities are also pushing for clarity and faster processing, reminding everyone of the economic and cultural value international students bring.
So what does this policy shift really signal?
It really underscores how digital surveillance is becoming a bigger factor in global immigration decisions. For students, especially from places like India, it adds this new layer of scrutiny and a whole lot of uncertainty to pursuing education abroad.
And connecting that theme of digital footprints and U.S. policy, there's another U.S. action mentioned in the sources, a visa ban targeting foreign officials over online censorship.
Yes, a new U.S. visa ban. This one targets foreign officials who are found to be censoring Americans online.
Who exactly falls under this?
It's reportedly aimed at officials who pressure U.S. tech companies to adopt global content moderation policies that clash with American free speech norms. Specifically mentioned are officials who might threaten arrests or penalties over social media posts made in the U.S.
Secretary of State Rubio made a strong statement on this one, too.
He did. He's quoted saying free speech is a pillar of shared values, and that foreign censorship actions against U.S. tech firms are unacceptable.
Who might this actually affect? Any specific regions mentioned?
The sources suggest it could potentially impact officials in Europe and Latin America, particularly those enforcing strict content rules on platforms like Facebook and X, formerly Twitter. The EU's Digital Services Act gets a mention. Some U.S. officials have criticized it as too restrictive. And the Trump administration previously opposed some European censorship laws, too.
Brazil also comes in.
Yes, Brazil's recent clashes with Elon Musk's platform over orders to take down alleged misinformation are noted as relevant context. Rubio's move here is framed as the U.S. taking a tougher line on foreign attempts to influence U.S. digital platforms and speech.
So part of a broader diplomatic push from Washington.
Seems so. It aligns with efforts to protect free speech globally. Rubio stated, "Passive treatment of censorship is over." The U.S. apparently plans to raise free speech concerns in talks with the EU and the UK, reinforcing this commitment to digital rights.
All right, let's end on a tech and business headline, one looking towards the future. Tesla is hiring in India.
That's right, a potentially significant development. The sources report Tesla is actively hiring for specific roles, prototype vehicle operators based in New Delhi and Mumbai.
And what's the job? What will they be doing?
Their main task is testing Tesla's Autopilot feature, specifically gearing up for its potential launch in the Indian market. It involves driving engineering vehicles for long hours, carefully collecting audio and camera data, and then providing detailed feedback to the engineering teams.
Any specific skills needed?
They need to be familiar with ADs, that's Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, and ADS, Autonomous Driving Systems in general.
Can you remind us what Autopilot is based on the source description?
Sure. According to the material, Tesla describes Autopilot as an ADIE RUSA designed to boost safety and convenience. It offers supervised driving features like handling lane changes, navigation, avoiding objects. Tesla emphasizes that when used correctly, it reduces driver workload.
And the tech behind it.
It relies heavily on multiple external cameras and vision processing. The sources note that in North America, Tesla actually moved away from radar and now uses a camera-based system called Tesla Vision for Autopilot.
This hiring feels like a concrete step. We've heard talk about Tesla in India for a while.
It really does signal a tangible commitment to entering the Indian market, following those discussions Elon Musk has had with Indian officials. A huge part of this testing will be optimizing Autopilot for Indian roads, which, as you know, present really unique challenges compared to, say, roads in the US or Europe, different traffic, infrastructure, driving styles.
And this fits with India's own goals too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tesla's potential entry aligns perfectly with India's big push for electric vehicles, EVs, and promoting sustainable mobility overall. The expectation is Tesla will introduce its EV lineup once they get the necessary approvals and the charging infrastructure is more developed.
So what's the bottom line significance of this testing getting underway?
It suggests India could realistically see Tesla vehicles with this advanced driver assistance tech on its roads relatively soon. It's a definite step towards adopting more sophisticated autonomous driving capabilities in the country down the line.
Wow. Okay, reflecting on all that just from one day's headlines, May 29th, 2025, we've covered everything from a COVID death and health responses, intricate international disputes involving New Zealand, China, Pakistan, to consumer rights online, a tragic smuggling story, U.S. political maneuvering, J&K statehood debates, military upgrades, corporate fraud, and finally, the future of driving with Tesla. It's an incredible spectrum.
It really is, and it shows how just digging a bit deeper into those daily news items like you can do with these sources reveals these really complex connections and ongoing global trends. You see how things link up in ways you might miss just scanning headlines.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for bringing these sources and walking us through the details today. It really does drive home the value of getting past the surface level to be truly well-informed.
My pleasure. And perhaps a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on, something that seemed to weave through several of these stories today. How significant is this interplay we're seeing between technology, national security, and state sovereignty? Think about it, the CCTV rules, the debates over social media censorship and foreign influence, the indigenous defense tech, even the way digital footprints now impact immigration. Is this tension becoming one of the defining dynamics of our time, shaping global competition and cooperation?
That's a great question to ponder. Definitely something to think about. And we encourage you, as always, keep noticing the details and the information you come across. Maybe even send us your own sources for a future deep dive. Until next time.